In the hidden archives of human history, there are texts and records that have been deliberately obscured, locked away from casual scrutiny. These are not merely books or scrolls, but vessels of knowledge so potent that they shaped the course of civilizations and yet carried warnings few have heeded. The air in these chambers is thick with the scent of aged parchment and ink, a tangible reminder of the minds that once sought to grasp truths beyond mortal comprehension. Among these forbidden chronicles, there exists the story of a figure whose influence has persisted across millennia. Known in demonology and arcane lore as Asmodeus, he is described as a being of both intellect and insatiable desire, a teacher of arts so secret that those who pursued them were often changed irrevocably. He is neither purely malevolent nor easily understood. Rather, he embodies the tension between human curiosity and the dangers of knowledge untamed. Accounts suggest that Asmodeus walked unseen alongside humankind, imparting insights into magic, ritual, and the manipulation of hidden forces. His lessons were coveted by some as keys to power, yet every revelation carried a cost, subtle, corrosive, and inescapable. To follow his guidance was to flirt with genius, temptation, and ultimately the shadow of one's own ambition. And so, we are left with the question that has haunted scholars and seekers alike: what is the true price of knowledge when it comes from such a source? Who benefits from the secrets he shared, and who succumbs to the ruin that inevitably follows? Tonight, we venture into the story of Asmodeus, the demon who taught magic to mankind. We will trace his influence, uncover the forbidden teachings he left behind, and explore the dark legacy that continues to echo through history, waiting for those daring enough to seek it. Long before the neat classifications of later demonologies, the figure that would become Asmodeus moved through older religious vocabularies as a shape of disturbance. In Jewish lore, he appears as Asmodeus, a name carried through apocrypha and rabbinic tales as both sovereign and scourge. In one account, he is not a mere tempter, but a ruler among spirits, capable of cunning deception and sovereign misrule. These early stories do not reduce him to a single vice. They mark him as an agent of disorder, at times capricious, at times dangerously instructive, whose presence forces communities to define their limits. Christian writers would later fold these older threads into a different shape. Where Jewish narratives treat Asmodeus as a complex figure of folklore, medieval Christian demonology pressed him into a taxonomy of sin. He became, in many treatises and sermons, the embodiment of lust, cataloged alongside other infernal powers that threatened the moral order. Yet even within this moral framing, a persistent otherness remained. Asmodeus was not merely appetite. He was a teacher of techniques and rites. Where lesser tempters stirred want, he handed down methods, names, gestures, recipes, by which men and women sought to bend occult forces to their will. The story of Tobit, preserved in the Apocrypha, crystallizes this duality. There, a widowed woman suffers mysterious losses. A demon keeps her from marriage by destroying every suitor. The narrative that later readers call Asmodeus is not content to be only antagonist. He is a presence that tests faith and exposes vulnerability. In that tale, the solution involves the invocation of an angel and the precise use of ritual substances, an implicit acknowledgement that the boundaries between divine protection and demonic artifice are negotiated by knowledge itself. Beyond scripture, rabbinic and folkloric sources, narrate encounters that complicate any neat moral portrait. In one strand, Asmodeus is a monarch among demons, capable of occupying palaces, issuing commands, even joining in the councils of kings. In another, he assumes disguises, seduces officials, and teaches forbidden crafts to artisans and scholars. These stories persist because they answer a deeper anxiety. That knowledge, once given, cannot be contained. If a demon teaches a craft, who controls the outcome? Who ensures the hand that learns will not turn that craft toward ruin? Etymology offers further clues to his enduring menace. Scholars have long noted resonances between his name and older Near Eastern demons, suggesting a migration of fear across languages and empires. The figure that emerges is not the invention of a single tradition, but a composite, an accumulation of anxieties about desire, authority, and the human appetite for power. Across these layers, a pattern emerges. Asmodeus is less a static monster than a mirror, reflecting the ways societies conceive of transgression and technique. Medieval grimoires and later occult compilations would take that mirror and polish it into instruments. In the hands of ceremonial magicians, Asmodeus appears among the ranked hosts of spirits, a prince, a king, a keeper of obscure lore. The practical manuals of magic, names, seals, conjurations, treat him as a source of specialized information, a repository for knowledge outlawed by orthodox priests. To consult such works was to acknowledge a trade-off, the promise of efficacy in exchange for contact with a force that blurred the line between assistance and possession. Iconography, too, refuses simplicity. Across manuscripts and marginal images, Asmodeus is depicted in varied guises, sometimes leonine, sometimes human, sometimes an assemblage of beastly parts, a face of man, the horns of a ram, a serpent's tail. These inconsistent portrayals are not errors, but testimony. Different communities perceived and feared different aspects of the same entity. For some, the emphasis was on seduction, an intellect that weaponizes longing. For others, the danger lay in the imparting of technique, ritual knowledge that could be turned to healing or harm depending on the wielder's intent. What binds these portrayals is a single, insistent idea. Knowledge without restraint rends communal bonds. Asmodeus' lessons do not come wrapped in moral instruction. They arrive as usable procedures, as secrets that promise to alter a practitioner's relation to cause and effect. It is this pragmatic dimension that distinguishes him from allegory. He is not merely an emblem of sin. He is, in story after story, a teacher whose pupils are left to account for the social consequences of their competence. This perception had palpable social effects. Accusations of unnatural learning of men and women who had acquired skills through illicit instruction became a way to explain sudden success or a catastrophic failure. Witchcraft trials and inquisitions often framed expertise as the outcome of demonic tutelage. A skilled healer, a cunning artisan, an unusually persuasive rhetorician could be suspected of having crossed an invisible threshold. They had, the accusation implied, not simply studied, they had received. And yet the sources preserve an ambiguity that resists simple condemnation. In some narratives, those who seek Asmodeus' instruction do so because orthodox means have failed them. In times of plague, famine, or political collapse, the promise of a shortcut to mastery, to protection, to influence acquires a lethal appeal. When institutions falter, the appetite for methods that offer control grows. Asmodeus, in these moments, appears as an answer to desperation. The very figure demonized by moralists was often invoked in the same breath as techniques that saved lives, mended crops, or secured power. Here lies the paradox. What is demonized in doctrine is sometimes demanded in practice. Even in the heavens, his intellect and desire would leave a mark that could not be erased. That mark is not merely the record of transgression, but the imprint of a persistent human problem: how to balance curiosity with caution when the tools of change are also instruments of undoing. As we trace the figure of Asmodeus from ancient anecdotes to the ritual books of later centuries, one question hardens: if the line between instruction and corruption can be so thin, how do communities decide which knowledge to keep and which to condemn? The answer, history suggests, has less to do with the content of the knowledge and more to do with the circumstances of its transmission. Across cultures, the fear attached to Asmodeus is a fear of ungoverned instruction, a fear that mastery without accountability will reshape social order. It is this fear that explains why a single figure could be cast alternately as tempter, teacher, king, and scourge. As the stories move from oral memory into written form, they accrete details, not to clarify, but to warn. The figure of Asmodeus becomes a lens through which societies interrogate the moral cost of expertise. The accounts preserve not only the particulars of a mythology, but the recurrent dilemma that knowledge itself poses. If a demon can teach a man to sing the true names of things, who then is responsible for the song? The record leaves us with no tidy answer. Instead, it hands us a set of traces, testimonies of fear and desire woven together, rituals cataloged alongside curses, and a persistent suggestion that some teachings, once set loose, change the world in ways no single law can foresee. The origin of Asmodeus, then, is not a single point in time, but a history of human responses to the problem of forbidden know-how, a history that will, in the chapters to follow, show how those lessons were taken up, adapted, and turned into instruments of consequence. If his presence could be so readily refracted through law, lore, and practice, what then did his instruction allow mortals to do? And, more importantly, who paid the price when the lesson was learned? The answer, history hints, lies in the nature of the knowledge he offered, a body of secrets as seductive as it was dangerous. Asmodeus did not simply whisper forbidden words. He unfolded methods, rituals, and techniques that promised power over the unseen, mastery over the forces that humankind had long feared to touch. Alchemy, the transformation of base into gold, was more than material ambition. In the tales, it became a metaphor for the transformation of the soul, a path fraught with peril for those who dared to proceed without caution. Magic, in the Asmodean sense, was not an abstract exercise. It was a craft of precision, requiring exact symbols, chants, and timing. Legends speak of manuscripts engraved with runes and diagrams, in which a single error could turn an invocation into catastrophe. Those who followed such instruction were said to gain uncanny insight, knowledge of poisons and medicines, the ability to manipulate fortune, and even the means to compel obedience in others. Yet every gain carried an undercurrent of dread, for the demon's teachings, though precise, were incomplete, deliberately so. They hinted at broader truths, but withheld the safeguards that would allow mortal minds to wield them without harm. Accounts from occultists and chroniclers across centuries reinforce the duality of his lessons. A medieval grimoire describes an invocation meant to summon spirits to answer questions of wealth or strategy. The practitioner, armed with correct seals and words, could extract information from the unseen. But the text warns, in phrases that have survived into modern compilations, "He who calls must know the shadow that follows. The answer will bend the soul if the heart is unready." It is here that the danger becomes tangible. Knowledge is not neutral. It carries consequences that often remain invisible until the practitioner has already crossed the threshold. Even folklore, passed orally, preserves these warnings. In one tale from Provence, a scholar learns to transform common metals into silver under Asmodeus' guidance. His wealth grows, his influence expands, but those closest to him fall into misfortune. Friends, family, apprentices, until the man finds himself surrounded by ruin, despite his apparent mastery. The story is repeated in various forms across Europe and the Near East. Each time, a mortal grasps a secret beyond his station, and each time, a price is exacted in suffering, isolation, or madness. Beyond material or practical applications, the demon's teachings touched human understanding itself. Astrology, divination, the reading of omens, all were said to be part of the instruction he offered. A ruler who sought his counsel might gain the foresight to avoid disaster, yet at the cost of moral compromise. A healer might learn the hidden properties of herbs and rituals, but if used indiscriminately, their skill could invite disease or death instead of remedy. Knowledge became a double-edged instrument, wielded by those daring enough to claim it, and resisted only by those wise enough to fear it. Man's fascination with these secrets was mirrored by fear. Historical records speak of scholars and magicians pursued by ecclesiastical authorities, accused of dealing with demons because their insights surpassed what should have been attainable by human reason alone. The tension between admiration and terror underscores the persistent ambiguity of Asmodeus' gift. It could elevate as easily as it could destroy. Human ambition was its vehicle, and hubris its most reliable companion. Stories suggest that Asmodeus' lessons were rarely neutral or sterile. Every ritual, every spell, and every formula contained an implicit test, an invitation to exceed one's limits. Those who passed were said to gain insight into things ordinarily hidden from the human mind. The architecture of the cosmos, the mechanisms of fortune, the hidden drives of desire and fear. Those who failed became instruments of their own undoing, haunted by the knowledge they could not properly contain. And yet, for all the danger, humans continued to seek him out. From the hidden study chambers of medieval Europe to clandestine gatherings in the Middle East, his name invoked awe and trepidation alike. A manuscript might claim that Asmodeus revealed the formula for invisibility, the rites to summon helpful spirits, or the gestures necessary to uncover the truth behind every secret desire. But always, those instructions were delivered with an edge of ambiguity, a subtle hint that understanding without discernment would lead to ruin. The most enduring lesson, repeated in every account, is that knowledge itself is a living force, neither wholly benevolent nor entirely malignant. It can illuminate or annihilate. And in the case of Asmodeus, the instruction he offered was never neutral. It was a trial by intellect and desire, designed to reveal the true nature of those who sought to wield it. But the knowledge he gave came with a price, one that history rarely records. That price, in many accounts, was the very essence of desire itself. Asmodeus did not simply teach, he enticed. He understood that human longing, whether for power, wealth, or forbidden understanding, could be as compelling a force as any spell or ritual. Desire, in his hands, became both instrument and weapon. Scholars who sought his teachings found themselves drawn into obsessions they could neither fully control nor entirely resist. What began as curiosity quickly morphed into compulsion. Legends speak of Asmodeus entering the lives of mortals not as a distant specter, but as an intimate presence, a whisper at the edge of consciousness. In one tale, a young nobleman, eager to master the arcane arts, is guided by the demon toward a woman of unmatched beauty. The demon's guidance is subtle, suggestions, insinuations, half-truths, but the result is devastating. The man's mind becomes divided, one half devoted to study, the other consumed by desire. Friendships wither, alliances crumble, and the very society that nurtured him begins to unravel. By the time he realizes the manipulation, he is trapped in a labyrinth of his own longing. The same patterns appear across centuries. In Persian and Arabian accounts, merchants and courtiers encounter a figure who teaches them secrets of influence, how to sway rulers, how to command loyalty, how to exploit the vulnerabilities of others. Yet these lessons carry an unseen chain. Every act of seduction, every use of charisma or cunning, slowly corrodes moral judgment. What begins as clever maneuvering becomes betrayal. What begins as charm becomes domination. Asmodeus' touch is never visible, but its effects ripple outward, leaving ruin in its wake. Even in European lore, his name is inseparable from lust and moral subversion. Tales describe young men and women drawn into secret gatherings, promised insight into hidden arts. There, desire is deliberately inflamed, relationships manipulated, rivalries provoked, loyalties tested. Those who succumbed often blame themselves, but the subtle orchestration of Asmodeus ensured that blame could never be fully understood. He taught that mastery over others is intertwined with mastery over oneself, and yet, in every story, humans fail that lesson. The mechanics of his influence are rarely explained in plain terms. Some manuscripts describe the alignment of intention with ritual, the careful invocation of attention and temptation. Others emphasize symbolic gestures or whispered phrases meant to awaken latent drives in the heart of the practitioner. In every account, the demon is less a visible entity than a catalyst. He shapes desire so that it becomes irresistible, weaponizing longing into a force that undermines reason, discretion, and moral restraint. What is most unsettling is the subtlety with which this corruption occurs. Desire does not strike like a lightning bolt. It seeps, persistent and patient, into the mind. A scholar might find his thoughts increasingly occupied by obsession, his ambitions reshaped, his loyalties questioned. A ruler might gain victories at the cost of compassion. A lover might win the object of their desire while losing themselves in the process. In each instance, Asmodeus' mark is evident only in retrospect, traces of manipulation hidden in the wreckage of ambition and affection. It is in this interplay of charm, cunning, and knowledge that Asmodeus' genius becomes most dangerous. He does not coerce openly. He seduces the intellect, preys upon the heart, and teaches mortals to exploit themselves before they exploit others. His lessons are simultaneously instructive and corrosive, providing a glimpse of mastery while ensuring that few can wield it without falling. When desire becomes a weapon, even the strongest minds can fall. Those who thought themselves disciplined are drawn into cycles of obsession, betrayal, and moral compromise. Friends are turned against one another, families fracture, entire communities may be destabilized by the invisible hand of temptation. And yet, the lure of power, of forbidden knowledge, continues to draw seekers forward, even as they tread a path they cannot fully perceive. As we follow the traces of Asmodeus' influence through history, one truth becomes unavoidable. He teaches not merely skills or secrets, but a method of engagement with the world in which desire itself is both key and trap. To encounter him is to confront the fact that human longing, once awakened and manipulated, can become a force as unstoppable as it is devastating. And so, with each whispered instruction, each subtle provocation, he ensures that no human who seeks him ever emerges unchanged, and that every lesson carries an invisible toll, one that will echo through the mind and the heart long after the immediate gains are realized. Yet the stories of Asmodeus are not confined to a single people, a single time, or a single text. His presence emerges in disparate cultures, each revealing facets of the same underlying danger, each reflecting the same tension between curiosity, ambition, and destruction. In Talmudic sources, he appears as Asmodeus, a demon capable of vast cunning and sovereign authority over other spirits. There, he is both sovereign and trickster, capable of seducing kings, manipulating councils, and sowing disorder with a quiet, calculated hand. One account tells of his imprisonment and temporary submission to divine command, yet even in captivity, his influence persisted, a reminder that control over such a being is never absolute. Moving eastward, Islamic demonology speaks of a similar entity in the figure of Shamarish, a demon whose teachings touch both the mystical and the forbidden. He imparts knowledge of the unseen, methods to command spirits, unlock hidden potential, and navigate the perilous intersection of divine law and human desire. Those who engage with him are warned. The veil between instruction and corruption is thin, and the temptations he presents are often woven into the very methods of mastery. Across Europe, in medieval grimoires and occult manuscripts, Asmodeus appears again, catalogued among the princes of hell. Rituals for summoning him are detailed with precision. Seals, invocations, timing of planetary alignments, all designed to compel obedience while simultaneously testing the practitioner's resolve. Scholars and magicians recorded his influence in recipes for manipulation, formulas for revelation, and subtle arts of persuasion. But these texts, no less than the tales of distant lands, emphasize an unavoidable truth. The knowledge he grants can elevate or destroy in equal measure, and the practitioner may not know which outcome awaits until it is too late. Patterns repeat with uncanny consistency. Across cultures, Asmodeus' teachings are intertwined with temptation, ambition, and the acquisition of forbidden knowledge. He offers methods that seem elegant and precise, yet the consequences of their use are rarely recorded fully. Mortals across continents encounter the same trap, a gift that appears to grant control over the world, but exacts a toll on the heart, the mind, and the bonds that hold communities together. In each tradition, desire is weaponized, intellect is tested, and human frailty is exposed. The scope of his reach is staggering. From the narrow streets of medieval European cities to the desert courts of the Middle East, from whispered Talmudic tales in study halls to manuscripts hidden in libraries, the figure of Asmodeus recurs as a constant presence in human attempts to reach beyond the ordinary. His lessons transcend geography and epoch, reflecting universal anxieties: the fear of knowledge beyond one's grasp, the allure of power that cannot be fully controlled, and the consequences of yielding to temptation. Even when names change, the essence of the demon remains. He is a master manipulator, a teacher whose methods exploit human weakness, a force whose influence does not respect borders, languages, or religious doctrines. Those who encounter him invariably face the same challenge: how to navigate the promise of mastery without surrendering to the corruption that accompanies it. Across continents and centuries, the mark of his influence is undeniable, but the truth is darker than any tale. The culmination of Asmodeus' lessons is rarely described in polite history. It is not a moment of revelation or triumph, but a turning point where human ambition meets its inevitable reckoning. In countless accounts, those who pursued his instruction are said to have entered into what scholars and occultists call the Forbidden Pact, an unspoken contract between mortal and demon, sealed not with ink, but with desire, secrecy, and a willingness to transgress moral boundaries. In one medieval account, a nobleman, desperate to secure his legacy, summoned Asmodeus in a secluded chamber. The demon offered the secrets of influence and manipulation, knowledge to outwit rivals, to compel obedience, to bend fate itself. The instructions were precise, demanding exact words, sigils drawn in rare inks, and actions performed at specific hours under the waning moon. The nobleman succeeded, gaining wealth, power, and sway beyond measure. Yet, those closest to him began to suffer inexplicable misfortunes. Allies turned traitor, friends fell to madness, and finally, family members perished in circumstances no rational mind could explain. The very gains he had sought became the instruments of ruin, and the pact he had entered was never acknowledged, save by the silent, persistent shadow at the edge of his sight. Similar tales emerge across time and place. In the courts of the Middle East, merchants and advisors reportedly engaged Asmodeus' influence to secure riches or knowledge of hidden markets. The result was often short-lived advantage paired with long-term calamity. Betrayals multiplied, fortunes collapsed, and the very skills acquired to command respect became tools for manipulation and distrust, eroding the social fabric around the practitioner. The structure of these pacts is consistent. They demand more than obedience. They demand surrender. Mortals are compelled to act, consciously or unconsciously, in ways that align with the demon's designs. The terms are rarely explicit. Asmodeus does not coerce in obvious ways. Instead, he offers opportunity, amplifies desire, and waits for the human to overreach. The lessons he imparts become the chains, each application drawing the practitioner deeper into moral compromise and existential risk. Even legends from Europe's grimoires reinforce this pattern. Rituals invoke Asmodeus to reveal hidden truths or to achieve mastery over spirits and outcomes. Success is granted, but it carries a latent consequence. The operator may gain command over forces unseen, yet the human psyche cannot withstand the full weight of such comprehension. Insanity, obsession, or moral decay often follows. The pact is completed silently, invisibly, leaving behind only traces of prosperity intertwined with ruin. The most chilling aspect of these accounts is the subtlety of the corruption. The mortal does not always recognize the bargain. Friends and kin may die, fortunes vanish, reputations crumble, but the practitioner sees only the immediate benefits, convinced of their skill and ingenuity. Desire, ambition, and the pursuit of knowledge act as the demon's instruments. By the time the human mind comprehends the cost, the pact has already reshaped their life irrevocably. This convergence of promise and peril illustrates a deeper truth. Knowledge and power, when divorced from restraint, become instruments of destruction. Asmodeus does not punish out of malice alone. He teaches through consequence. Each triumph contains its own shadow. Each success carries embedded failure. Each revelation carries a hidden toll. And yet, even knowing the cost, some still sought him out. The shadow of Asmodeus does not fade with the closing of a book or the passing of centuries. His influence lingers in the margins of human ambition, in the subtle acts of cunning and desire that shape history, and in the fascination with powers that lie just beyond comprehension. Across generations, the same patterns repeat, mortals drawn to knowledge that promises mastery, yet concealing a cost they cannot fully perceive. The lessons of Asmodeus are encoded not just in grimoires, not just in legend, but in the choices of those who seek to grasp the forbidden. Even today, traces of his shadow persist. Scholars obsessed with uncovering hidden truths, innovators tempted to bend the world through methods deemed unorthodox, seekers of power who overreach. These are the echoes of his presence. Desire and intellect, curiosity and ambition remain entangled in ways that few fully understand. In each act of mastery or misdeed, there is a faint resonance of that ancient teaching, a reminder that the pursuit of forbidden knowledge is never without consequence. And yet, the danger is not always evident. It moves quietly, patiently, waiting in the hidden corners of thought and intent, in the gaps between moral clarity and ambition, in the silent corridors of power. It is in this tension, between the allure of insight and the inevitability of cost, that Asmodeus' legacy endures. Some knowledge is never truly lost. It waits, patient and hungry, for the next seeker. If the secrets of Asmodeus unsettled you, there are more forbidden tales hidden in the archives. Subscribe and dare to uncover them.